What is up guys, Alex from Lakey Wargames here and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be diving back into the Nighthaunt tactics. We're going to be going into the enhancement section and we're going to be checking out those awesome command traits. Alrighty guys, so before we jump into the tactics part of the video, I just want to give a big thank you to everybody who has submitted and is allowing me to use photos of their Nighthaunt throughout this series. What I do, if you're not familiar with the process, is I also admin in the Nighthaunt Facebook group, fan Facebook group. What I do is every time I make one of these videos I pin a post to the top of the group, and if you want to submit any pictures of your finished Nighthaunt to this video series for me to use, what I do is just pin that to the top of the group. You guys comment in below with your photos of the Nighthaunt that you wish to submit, and then I will save them into a big folder under the credited version of your name. If you want me to use something else, then you just let me know as you comment your photos into the post, and then I'll be able to use them throughout the series. So a big thank you to everybody who has given me permission and has commented and submitted their photos for me to use. There's so much awesome work and I just love sharing these out. So if you wanted to take part in that, I will leave a link to the Facebook group in the description below, and if you're interested in leaving anything, then just comment it on the pin post, which will be at the top of the group. So, with that said, let's jump on into today's video, and that is going to be the command traits. Last video we looked into the battle traits section of the tome. We went through all of the allegiance abilities that was given to us as Nighthaunt. Today we're going to be jumping into those command traits, and what we're going to be basically doing is then we're going to go through the artifacts and the spells, so when we get into our unit specific tactics guides we can refer back to any of the command traits or artifacts of power that might combo off and give us an advantage. So with all that said and out of the way, let's get on with those command traits. Now in the book here we are given 6 command traits to choose from. These can be applied to any Nighthaunt heroes, but you cannot give command traits to unique heroes. So basically the following of Nagash, Lady Olinda, Kurdos, Reikenor, Alrich and the Briar Queen cannot benefit from these. So always what I do is when I build my Nighthaunt list, I would recommend that you choose one of your non-unique heroes to be your general, and that way they're going to benefit from one of these command traits for free. None of the unique heroes in that list give you any benefit for being the general anyway. Lady Olinda is a slight exception to this, the fact that she counts as the general in addition to whomever you choose to lead your army, but again cannot benefit from any of these command traits. So with that in mind, let's jump on into the list of the 6 command traits that we have in our Nighthaunt tome and see what they are good for. Now, the first of these traits that we are given is called Lingering Spirit, and this gives the general a ward save of 4+ for damage inflicted by mortal wounds. Now, right off the bat, that sounds absolutely fantastic. I mean, you've already ethereal from the battle traits in our allegiance abilities, so now it makes it sound like you're going to get a 4+4+, which is great, and it would be, but there's a key element there, which is damage inflicted by mortal wounds. So you don't always get this 4+ after save unless it's specifically designated by something that causes mortal wounds. So in that case you're not going to get your armor save, it's just going to go straight through and you get a 4+ save, which isn't the worst case. I mean, having a 4+ save against mortal wounds is great. You get a 6+ ethereal save anyway, but to be honest, when we get into the unit specific sections, we do have the spirit hosts which act as bodyguards and are able to deflect wounds off of heroes and onto themselves. So you really have to weigh up if that 4+ save specifically against mortal wounds is going to be worth it taking up the command trait slot against the 5 other options that we have. So it's a good all-round pick, but again is specifically tied to mortal wounds, so keep that in mind if you are thinking of taking this trait. The second command trait is Terrifying Entity. Now this makes enemy units terrified if they are within 6 inches of the general instead of 3 inches for the purposes of the Aura of Dread battle trait. Now we covered this in the battle traits video, which was the video before this one, but Aura of the Dread is basically enemy units become terrified if they're within 3 inches of a Nighthaunt unit, and while it's terrified they cannot receive Inspiring Presence, and that has no effect on Nighthaunt units. Now Terrifying Entity is good in the fact that obviously it's going to extend your ability to terrify units and stop them being able to ignore your battle shock via Inspiring Presence. We did say that the only downside to Aura of Dread in the battle traits video was the fact that you have to be in combat to basically gain benefit from it being within that 3-inch bubble. This takes away that point, and it means that your general can just sit safely outside of combat. Maybe you're behind a screen, like say if you've got a 10-man unit of Bladegeist, your general can quite happily sit between the with the Bladegeist between them and the enemy, and can still terrify enemy units. I wouldn't rate this trait too highly, because if you're going to do something like that, the Bladegeist will be projecting the terror onto the enemy unit anyway, because they're already going to be within that 3-inch bubble. So to have the general actually make use of being that 6 inches away, you are going to basically just sort of be out there on your own, which is better than nothing, but is very, very specific, and I wouldn't really recommend Terrifying Entity above the other command traits that we have here. With that said, the only time that this will really come into play for you without having to get your general into the mix is if you were going to inflict really heavy shooting damage, which isn't something that Nighthaunt are particularly known for, but it is possible through a few different units to cause mortal wounds at range, or shooting attacks from something like the Craven Throne Guard. Then you can have your general just sitting that safe 6 inches away. You can inflict a load of shooting damage from, you know, wherever that range is coming from, and in that case they're not going to be able to Inspiring Presence in the following battle shock phase, but again it's very, very specific usage. Flying right on through to our third command trait of the list, and that is Ruler of the Spectral Hosts. Now this is a once per battle usage command trait, and it's at the end of your movement phase. You can pick one friendly Nighthaunt summonable unit that has been destroyed. After you pick a unit that has been destroyed, you roll a dice on a 4+, a new replacement unit with half the models from the unit that was destroyed, rounding up, is added to your army. You set that unit up wholly within 12 inches of the general and more than 3 inches away from all enemy units. Now, I really, really like this trait. The two big downsides for it are it's only once per game, so if you use it, then it's like a one and done. You do your trick and it's over. The other side is the roll of a 4+. It's basically a 50-50 chance. Whether you get it or not, then the once per game does kick in. So if you roll that dice and you don't get that 4+, then your command trait is just gone. So really you're going to be weighing this up against everything that is able to use every turn versus this, which is only once per game. But depending how you build your list, you really have to have in mind if you're going to make the most out of this. Say if you've got a big unit of 30 Grimghast Reapers, that's a really big expensive block, and if you throw it headlong into the enemy and you lose all 30 Grimghast Reapers, the ability to be able to bring 15 of them back at the end of one movement phase is just amazing. Like, your opponent's going to think, yes, I got rid of all them Grimghast Reapers. Same could be said for big units of Bladegeist Revenants, just anything really. Say Chain Rasp Horde is another really good one. If you're really bogging the enemy down with a massive unit of Chain Rasp, they finally cut through them, and then you just go bam, 4+, and then you get half the unit back. You just throw them straight back into the enemy's face, continue to tie them up. So it's a really risky one. If you're a bit of a gambler, then this one might be for you. I really, really like this one at times, but again, it depends on your list. Some of these other traits might be more beneficial to you because you can get use out of them every turn, whereas this is the one and done and it's not guaranteed. That 50% chance can really come back and bite you. But if you're not going to be using any of the other command traits, then it can be a really useful asset just to have in your back pocket, because when it does go off, it can really swing the game. The fourth command trait that we have on our list is Hatred of the Living, and this allows your general to re-roll hit and wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by the general that target an enemy unit that does not have the death keyword. Now, if this didn't have that last bit bolted on where it doesn't work against other death keyworded units, then this would almost be a go-to every time, because re-rolling hits and wounds can be really, really great. But if you're writing a list, you're taking it to a tournament, and you know you're having to write a list against all comers, then this one isn't going to work for a quarter of the games that you play. It's only going to work against the Chaos, Order and Destruction factions. So if you come up in a Nighthaunt v Nighthaunt, or SOULBLIGHT is very popular in a tournament scene, then this command trait is going to do absolutely nothing for you in those matchups. But if you're, say, playing a casual pickup game, or you just want to take it because maybe your local scene doesn't have that many death players, then this can be a really good and strong trait on something like a Lord Executioner or the Knight of Shrouds, whether that's the foot or mounted version, because they have very decent, respectable stat lines for the cheapish heroes that they are, with a decent number of attacks, so getting that reroll hits and wounds is absolutely awesome. It's also not specific to anything like heroes, so it just gets to reroll all hits and wounds against everything that it targets, whether you're fighting the enemy's chaff or you are trying to chip down, say, some of their heroes. So being able to get a combat character like that in rerolling hits and wounds can be really, really good. Next, and the penultimate one on our list, is Spiteful Spirit, and that is at the end of the combat phase. If this general was allocated any wounds that were not negated during that phase, you roll a number of dice equal to the wounds characteristic of this general. For each 4+, each enemy unit within 6 inches of this general suffers 1 mortal wound. So there's quite a few triggers on this command ability, but if all the stars align and you manage to pull it off, it can be really, really impactful. Now, you can put this onto any of your heroes that can benefit from the command trait, but what we're going to use for this example is we're going to be looking at the Knight of Shrouds on Ethereal Steed. He has some really cool combos with this, and also will be just our nice flatline example as a go-to, but again, you can apply this to any of the heroes that benefit from the command trait. So, breaking down this command trait, you have to take any number of wounds in that phase and not be slain. So for example, our Knight of Shrouds on Ethereal Steed has 6 wounds, so if he takes anywhere, whether it's 1 wound or he takes 5 wounds, this will trigger. What happens is every enemy unit within 6 inches, we then have to roll a number of dice against. So in this case, our wounds characteristic being 6 means that we're going to roll 6 dice against every enemy unit within that 6-inch bubble, and on a 4+ for each one of those 6 dice, they're going to take a mortal wound. So if you wouldn't manage to get your general right into the thick of the fight and there were, say, 3 enemy units all piled up around him in combat, then you're going to be able to roll 6 dice against all 3 of those units, and with the 4+ on average, you are going to deal 3 mortal wounds to them. Now, the other reason that I say that this stacks nicely with the Knight of Shrouds, and I want to use him as the example, is that he has the Sword of Stolen Hours on his War Scroll, and that is that at the end of the combat phase, if any models were slain by attacks with this unit's Sword of Stolen Hours, you get to heal a wound that was allocated to that unit, and he also adds 1 to his wounds characteristic. So every turn that he was in combat and you manage to slay something, you heal back a wound and you get to put +1 to your characteristic, which then means if you take a wound in the following turn, you get to trigger this command ability again, and now you'd have 7 dice to roll. And if you manage to get it, say, twice in 2 turns, then you'd have 8 dice to roll against every unit within 6 inches. And if you can stack that up quite nicely, you know, it's not out of the realms of possibilities to be doing 9 or 10 dice against enemy units. I hope I didn't butcher the explanation on that too much. If you're a little bit confused in maybe the way that I've worded that, please say down in the comments below, and I will be able to type a more clear response if needed. Also, just to reiterate again, it isn't just the Knight of Shrouds that will work on. Obviously, you could use that on anything else, so say like your Lord Executioner, who's only got 5 wounds, but just being able to stack with the Sword of Stolen Hours, which is specific to the Knight of Shrouds, foot and mounted, to be able to heal yourself and buff your wounds characteristic to be able to get the most out of Spiteful Spirit, is where this command trait really begins to shine. So, with all that said, we're going to be moving on to the last command trait in our list, and that is Cloaked in Shadow. This command trait allows this general cannot be picked as the target of a shooting or combat attack by more than 1 unit per phase. Now, this is arguably probably the strongest, I would say, of all the lists that we've been through, just because it is always relevant every turn, and it really stops your opponent from being able to specifically focus out your general. Now, what I would recommend for this command trait is to stick it on something like a Cruel Ghast or maybe a Spirit Torment, something that's really linchpin to your army. Because what that effectively is going to do is stop the enemy from being able to snipe out that hero. Again, if you had something like Spirit Hosts in your army, which are able to transfer wounds across, then it can be really, really tough for your opponent to be able to cut down your heroes. Say they are a Stormcast list and they have lots of shooting, they've got lots of Vanguard Raptors or Judicators that are trying to snipe out your heroes from a distance, then this will stop them being able to pick them with two different units in the same shooting phase. So they would have to pick one of their units, shoot at your general, and if they didn't manage to kill them, then they can't shoot at them again with a different unit for that turn. Same as in combat, if you get locked in combat with multiple units, only one of those units for that turn is going to be able to target your general, and if they swing and a miss, then that's it. There's no more combat targeting for the enemy. But again, like I said, the reason that you want this on something like a linchpin hero, something say like a Cruel Ghast, or maybe even a Guardian of Souls, something that's not going to be too thick in the fight himself, but just sort of sitting behind the lines and buffing your troops up, really makes this hard for your opponent if they've got the shooting and they're trying to snipe your heroes. If you suffocate them with the Spirit Hosts as well, then not only have you got your Ethereal save, ignoring the modifiers to your save, so if they've got any rend, and you also get that 6-up after save, but then again you can also have the 3+ shrug onto the Spirit Host as an option, and again they can only target you once per phase with a unit, so you're really limiting your opponent on the amount of damage output they can put into trying to snipe your hero, which of course through a medium of ways in this book you could heal yourself back up, you could teleport out. You can really get your hero out of dodge if they get stuck into a sticky situation, but then you're going to just really limit their ability to snipe you from a distance. So that was all 6 of the command traits from the Nighthaunt tome. My personal favourites are the Cloaked in Shadow and the Ruler of the Spectral Hosts, depending on the type of list that I'm building. I think that Cloaked in Shadow is more of your competitive pick because it really hampers your opponent at all times, and Ruler of the Spectral Host is one of those sort of wacky, fun ones that can really turn a game on its head when when it does come into effect. I would also throw out a good mention to the Spiteful Spirit, because that is a really fun one if you've got the hero that can really trigger that. If I'm taking a Knight of Shrouds on Ethereal Steed for the combo that we spoke about at the time, then that one can be really, really fun. Again, I do think the Cloaked in Shadow one is the most competitive of the 6, in my opinion. But you guys let me know what you think down below. Which of these command traits is your favourite? Which combinations have you managed to pull out with these and have success with? And as always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Stay safe and happy wargaming. Psst. Hey you! Did you know that Lakey Wargames now has an official eBay store? You can buy yourself all kinds of pre-painted and new on sprue hobby goodness and support the channel at the same time. There's a link in the description below if you want to check it out. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it's a fantastic way to support the channel. Okay, see you in the next one.